Welcome back to the Good Leader podcast. I'm Will Vanderhart, and it's great to have you here. Remember, this is a podcast which is aimed for leaders, for church planters and people in Christian charity. And I'm delighted today to welcome our special guest, Matt Wattis. Matt, it's really great to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Now, Matt, we've known each other for quite a long time. You come from a ministry background. Your dad is a minister, but you've been very successful in business and also been involved in governance and charity for a long time. Let me just to say, just up front, a bit about your history, a bit about your family and what led you into the business world.
Okay, so yes, my dad's a church minister. He probably when I turned about 10 or 11, he pastored a church, but I'd been brought up in church. And that obviously comes with various challenges. I think when you're a pastor's kid or a minister's kid, you want to try and be yourself, but that's as growing up, we're always trying to find ourselves. But often you're measured by who your parents are and the roles they take, and so you are very conscious of that. So I think growing up as a pastor's kid, you end up living out sort of expectations that are a reflection of your mum and dad in ministry, as opposed to just you being you. So there is a challenge with that, but I think I came through okay-ish, probably a few rough edges, but I didn't despise it. My dad was very committed to the church, and I think that's a great, admirable thing. Loved his passion for the church, loved his passion for people. But often there's a challenge with that, because just balancing ministry and family, there's a price you pay, and it's a hard balance to follow. But on the whole, it's been okay. But so I went into business. Didn't feel a call into ministry. I've always been closely aligned with church and involved in church and very active in church, but never really saw myself as being a pastor, not like my dad. I didn't have that calling. I think you certainly have to be called to do that type of work, and my dad was especially called and served it well. I never had that mantle on me, so I gravitated towards business. I do remember some years ago, I was my first job was working for a Christian charity, and then I felt God tell me to move out of that Christian charity and work within the secular workplace. And that felt like a retrograde step. Because my dad being a pastor, I thought, well, this is great. I'm working for a Christian charity. This is where God's placed me, and I'm doing a good thing. I'm using practical skills, but in a Christian environment. Why would he want to take me out of here? And I'm doing such good work for the Lord. All very Christianese, I'm saying here. It's all very, but with all these... But why would he want to take me out of there and put me in the secular world? But now I see, I'm nearly 50, so 30 years on, I can see there was a plan in all of that. And so I was able to develop my experience and my exposure to business. And it's sort of gone full circle. So whilst I've had a degree of success in business and I still continue to work in business, I can now take a lot of what I've learned there and bring it back into a Christian environment.
And we've had some great conversations over the last few years about your leadership. I mean, you're very modest, so it was very difficult to get you to really talk about how effective you have been in business and leadership. One of the things I've noticed about you is that you have a particular eye to good governance, and I think many of the leaders that we work with have a high level of passion, high level of vision, and a high level of calling. But the governance issues are something that we're having to backfill with. But I've noticed you've come alongside a number of pastors. You've been on a number of boards. You've been involved in kind of governance of churches as well as charities. Could you just say a bit, if you're talking to people just starting out in ministry, thinking about planting a church, or maybe starting a new charity, what would you say about the importance of good governance?
It's hard work. I would say that. So it doesn't come easy, and you can feel like it's stifling vision, and you can feel like it's crowding the getting of things done. But it is necessary. Legally it's necessary, and whether you're a church or whether you're any other organisation, you are governed by the laws of the land, and if you're a charity, you're governed by the Charities Commission. So you have to dance to their tune. You have to submit your returns. You have to report everything in the right way, and that's just with Charities Commission and financial governments and legal governments, but then also, and I think we're realising this more and more in well, whether it be a secular work or Christian work, just safeguarding and those issues and making sure that you are operating with integrity, that there's boundaries in place, that you're serving the people in the best way, you're serving your staff in the right way, you're still performing and there's vision and there's purpose around the organisation, you're successfully achieving all you achieve. But it has to be within that framework of having good governance. You have to have everything in place and having the right board in place that supports you, having good accountability, open lines of communication, and really just serving the organisation, seeing all the people involved, whether they be patrons, customers, clients, employees, whoever they are, that they're all stakeholders and they're all human and they all need care and attention wherever they're at. And so I think good governance will enable that to happen. There's no magic ingredient but I think just being really vigilant, making sure everything is in place and the right people are in place is a good starting point. It's very simple, but I don't think it really has to be much more complicated than that.
Matt, you're very good at making complex things straightforward and putting them in language that people can really connect with. So thank you. That was actually a really great, really helpful overview of what's necessary. You're one of those people who I've lent on or certainly discussed with ability to identify good team members. You've got a real sort of nous, I know, a gut sort of instinct about people. I know a lot of leaders have asked you to effectively kind of take a steer on a new employee or to kind of give them guidance on maybe a new board member. That skill of being able to identify a good team member or potentially a good person for governance is quite rare. But I'm going to ask you if you would give us a bit of an insight into what you're looking for when you're looking to employ or when you're looking to bring someone on team or when you're looking to put someone on board. What sort of characteristics are you looking for?
What I'm certainly not doing is just reading a CV. I can't just go off a piece of paper that's in front of me. I know that God can speak to me. I know that I can get a feeling through the Holy Spirit and that He'll guide me. But I need to press the flesh. I need to sit with them. I need to see the whites of their eyes and understand who they are and where they're at. And that isn't just in the area of governance. That's in who they are as a husband or a wife, who they are as a father or a mother, who they are as a son and a daughter. I want to get under the skin of who they really are, where they worship, how they manage their own discipleship and their own walk. And once I have a gauge on those things, then I'm more armed to make the right decision about whether they're the person that's suitable. And I think John Maxwell, I think he talked about the 3 C's, and that's competence, chemistry, and character. And certainly, I mean, competence you can develop, I think, and character is it's probably harder to develop over time. You'd hope that's foundational within you. But chemistry, that if chemistry is not there, it's very hard to get chemistry. If it's not there at the very beginning, then it's very hard to recover from that. So I think that's something that can be overlooked, and you don't want people that think like you all the time. I don't want a clone of me, and I don't want a clone of Will. We want the differences, and we want that different insight and approach. But there still needs to be a bit of chemistry, I think, there for it to work.
So that's such a helpful insight, Matthew. And I guess for many leaders who are starting out, there is a sort of a poverty in the pool, particularly in church leadership. And the sense is, here's someone who can play the guitar, great, they could be our worship leader. Here's someone who can use a word processor, brilliant, they can be our operations person. So it's kind of, there's often this person will fill the gap, rather than a sense of like, actually, are we recruiting? In that situation where there's a sort of gap, it's easy to make some quite significant mistakes in terms of employment, isn't it? What would you advise someone who's has come to it with the mentality of we just need to fill these spaces and I haven't got the luxury of choice?
Yeah. Well, I think you'll pay the price later if you make the wrong. The mantra is you hire slowly and fire quickly. Sounds very brutal. That's in the business world, I guess. But I think you hiring slowly is crucial. And whilst you might feel like you have to rush this and you've got to get things done quickly, I think you have to be very careful with that. And I would always err on the side of caution. I've seen us hire in various roles I've had. We've hired for a position multiple times because we didn't get it right first time, and it's just very messy and very difficult. So now I'm probably a lot more cautious and really get under the skin of that person and how they can be integrated into the team before we go any further.
That's great advice, and I would reiterate that 100 times in terms of hire very slowly, be very intentional. If there isn't the right person for the role, just leave the role vacant until there is, because that hasty in recruitment can be really difficult. Matthew, a few minutes left. One of the things, again, I sense that you're very good at in your own businesses, but also with charities, thinking carefully about the fundamentals of like a good job description, and actually, how do you define what you want someone to do, and what should leaders think about when it comes to the right sort of job description? Now, I mean, I'm sure this is an insight you've seen a number of times, is cutting and pasting a sort of generalized job description off a website somewhere, sending it to someone, and then saying, oh, we'll tell them what they're really going to do later on when they arrive. What's the problem with that, and what should we be doing?
Well, a good way around it for me is I've hired very good HR people, so I don't have to worry about it all. So they do my job for me. So I'm not necessarily at the cold face of all this all the time, but certainly with everything and throughout all of this, it's all about good communication and being very clear and open and honest and operating with integrity, so that you're not hoodwinking somebody into a job. You're not promising, and then they arrive and then it's something very different. And I think you just have to be very clear from the outset what the role is, very clear of who you're wanting to fill that role, and because it can only move at the speed of trust. And I think if from the very beginning you've broken trust in any way, or they may have broken trust with saying they're qualified in this area and they're not, and they're clearly incompetent, or whatever, it's very hard to recover from that. And so I think from the outset, having everything clearly defined as best you can, even though there's always going to be some flex in that. I think you have to allow for that. But that's in your language. When you're talking to the people, you talk about there being flex, there being the need to move with the role, and that it's okay, we can put down on paper, this is what we hope it to look like. But it might change slightly. This might happen. You might be called to do this. I think as long as you're communicating all those things, then that should sort of result in a happy marriage, I guess.
That's great advice, Matt. I'm really interested in what you just said about that the relationship can only move forward at the speed of trust. We've just got a couple of minutes left of this podcast, and I'd love you just to paint a picture for those who are watching, about what a healthy trust-based relationship looks like between a leader and a board, or a leader and a PCC, or a leader and particularly the team above the leader. So not necessarily the team below, that's very important, but how do you foster that? You've talked a bit about good communication. I'm sure that's part of it.
Well, I think if you find yourself in an elevated position of leadership within an organisation, it's hard for you to bleed down. And you feel responsible for everybody, and where do you go when you're up against it? So you need a good board around you. You need that group of people that you can be accountable to, but that aren't there ready to beat a stick because you're failing or because you're struggling, but are there to stand with you, to pray with you, to work with you, and to try and find some solution or some help in that. So I think if you can have a board, or you can have people around you, or an accountability group of people who are for you, and you know that they're for you, they've got to be for the organisation, but they're also for you and they want you to succeed, then you'd have confidence that they're going to do things for your best interests, and I think that's a great starting point. But it also starts with you affording yourself the luxury to be open and totally honest and vulnerable. And even though you might be in a place whereby you feel like you're struggling, you feel like you're not doing your job properly, don't try and hide that, because you will be found out at some point. It's only a matter of time. But try and front up to it, and then if you've got that board in place and that support network in place, then you can trust the process, and they're going to work with you. But you have to be vulnerable as well. But it's about, again, operating at the speed of trust. If you have the right systems in place, you can trust those systems, and they're going to support you and support the organisation. So I think it's as simple as that.
Matthew, that is so many great insights on leadership. Thank you so much. And really, some of that advice I know some other people will be hearing for the first time. So thank you for breaking the ice. Again, we'll try and put some notes underneath this podcast for you to look at, to ask some deeper questions moving forward. We hope you've found this as inspiring and helpful as I have today. Massive thanks to our guest, Matt Wattis, and hope you have a really blessed day. God bless you. And we'll see you again soon.